It is 7 o'clock, and I'm going to call this meeting to order. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, council members, city officials, and our streaming audience. Welcome to the October 14, 2024 City Council regular meeting. We are meeting at 26 South Paint Street, Chiillicothe. I would ask the clerk to call the roll.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. Bennett?
Here.
Payne?
Here.
Nickerson? Barnes?
Here.
McKeever?
Here.
Dement?
Here.
Preston?
Here.
Kroll? Creed?
Here.
Mr. Prohl and Ms. Nickerson are not here. Is there a motion to excuse them from the meeting? Motion by Mr. Dement, second by Mr. McKeever, and the clerk will call the roll.
Bennett?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Barnes?
Yes.
McKeever?
Yes.
Dement?
Yes.
Preston?
Yes.
Creed?
Yes.
Mr. Prohl and Ms. Nickerson will be excused from this meeting. I would ask Mr. Barnes to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. The minutes from the last special meeting have been distributed. As everyone had an opportunity to take a look at those, and I would ask if there are any corrections, additions, or deletions to those minutes. Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve those minutes. Motion by Ms. Bennett, second by Mr. Barnes, and the clerk will call the roll.
Bennett?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Barnes?
Yes.
McKeever?
Yes.
Dement?
Yes.
Preston?
Yes.
Kroll?
Yes.
Creed?
Yes.
I would note for purposes of the record that Mr. Prohl was excused, but he's here. So we're glad he's here and ready to go. We'll now move to reports of committees. Development Committee, Mr. Dement.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. Development has nothing on tonight's agenda and has nothing to report. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Engineering Committee, Mr. Barnes.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. Engineering has 6 items on tonight's agenda. Items 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 are up for a second reading. Basically, they are updating and amending sections of the codified ordinances pertaining to building and zoning departments. And those can go for a third read. Number 13, we had a committee meeting last week, and we have had a report of the retaining wall on Mechanic Street, kind of at the bottom of Grandview Cemetery Hill, is in dire need of repair. In fact, the engineering department has found several cracks bowing over the retaining wall and evidence of a potentially likely landslides. And so they have estimated $35,000 to repair. The committee does feel that this is an emergency, and so at the appropriate time, I will be requesting a waiver of the 3-read rule on this one. That's all we have to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the Finance Technology Committee, Mr. Prohl.
The Finance Committee has nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Human Resource Committee, Ms. Payne.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. We do have one item on the agenda this evening. It's item number 8, an ordinance amending section 515.02 of the codified ordinances of the city of Chiillicothe, Ohio, titled Court Personnel, and appropriating funds for this position for the remainder of the year. We did meet on this September 25th, and we agreed as a committee that the court does need a position to basically take care of everyday custodial and maintenance type duties. They've been in that building for 11 years and never had a full-time position. Currently, they're being cleaned a couple times a month. So this is a much-needed position for them. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Parks and Rec, Ms. Nickerson is not here. She has COVID, by the way, just so everybody knows to stay away from her. But next we'll go to Safety Service Committee.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. We have 3 items on the agenda tonight. First is the 3rd reading, accepting appropriating funds from the David Mead Massey Trust Fund for police evidence testing. Hopefully everybody will vote for that. We also have items 9 and 10. 9 is $18,000 for the fire department, moving money within their capital fund to pay for Opticom equipment and declare an emergency. And number 10 is accepting and appropriating funds of $1,000 for the senior home inspection program. So both of those can go to the 2nd read. That concludes our report.
Thank you. Utilities Committee, Mr. McKeever.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. Utilities has nothing to report on.
Thank you. City Service Committee, Ms. Preston.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. City Services has nothing on the agenda and has nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Community Affairs Committee, Ms. Bennett.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. We have 2 things on the agenda tonight. Number 11 is the first reading to accept grants for HUD for their budget. And number 12, an agreement with us and the county commissioners for legal cost for council, appointing counsel for the city of Chiillicothe. And that would be it. They're both on first reads.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to reports of officials, and I see that we have the auditor here, so I'll turn to her.
So tonight we had our first budget meeting, and then we will have another one next Monday, I believe at 5:30. Yeah, 5:30 on October the 21st. And that concludes my report.
Next, we have audience participation. Any person wishing to address the council must first provide his or her name and address. Comments shall be limited to 5 minutes, and I'll give you a warning when there is 1 minute remaining.
And I want to thank you, council members, for the opportunity to be here with you tonight.
Could you state your address? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
My name is Sharon Veerhoff, 89 Row Lane, Kingston, Ohio, 45644.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The Assistance House is why I'm here, and it has been so valuable to all of us, and it's the best kept secret in Chiillicothe. We've been around since 1914, and people don't really know, but they do find us when they need us. And so it was Colonel Richard Enderlin who called it the Welfare House in 1914. So in a century and a decade, it has tried to serve the people of Chiillicothe. I would say that I remember the long lines to receive the injection when I was a child, when in the 1950s, polio was pervasive, and Colonel Richard Enderlin was responsible to make sure that there were those who received those very vaccinations. And I got that, and I really thanked him for that, but at the same time didn't ever meet him. As a former educator in Chiillicothe City Schools in the 1970s and in the 1980s and then the 1990s, I remember counseling students whose academic performance was negatively impacted because of the kinds of hunger and risk and opportunities for money in their families. And so I've always felt very strongly that there is a need for them, and the assistance house is one that does help out as needed, but not everybody really finds us. I think those in need really have. My comrade here is someone who is going to be able to talk to you a little bit more further about what we are looking for from you tonight, all right? And I thank you very much for letting me talk to you, and nice to see 7 of you in particular. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You folks have seen me before, but I'll tell you again, John Thacker at 990 Columbus Street, apartment 307 in Chiillicothe. I am also fortunate to be asked to be a board member of the Assistance House of Ross County, which is its full name, but we call it the Assistance House. At the Nonprofit Funding Committee meeting a week ago, I was called away and could not give a presentation on behalf of the Assistance House to that committee. A lot of you were in attendance, and we certainly meant no disrespect, but we were actually over at 50 West raising money the old-fashioned way, as I put it. However, we are here to remind you that we did make a presentation. We're asking for $20,000. Perhaps some of you have seen it, perhaps not. That would be work that would be in addition to what we're already doing. We have very generous sponsors, including the United Way, as well as the Mead Massey Trust. I didn't get the full name, but of course other groups in Chiillicothe. And you know what? If you know any groups, I'm pointing at you, Steve, that would like to donate, that would be great. But this is in addition to that. We would like to be able to fund rent assistance for 40 additional people, and then utility assistance for 40 additional people. The reason that's so important is because these are people that are working, and we want to keep them working because then they can add to the tax base. If they aren't able to get to work, we sometimes also have done gas card, but that's a separate thing. That's not what we're asking for the city council from, but that we do that. We do other things like provide them work shoes if they need them, if they are returning to work, which some people are. I could give you thing after thing after thing as to what we do. What we do is what we think that working people in Chiillicothe and surrounding area would need to be able to stay working. So if you guys can, at the appropriate time, if it does come up for consideration, if you would consider it, the Assistance House, you can also check out any information. I believe it's called the Assistance House at Gmail, probably .org. I don't know the exact thing. And it also has a Facebook page, which actually is very descriptive as to all the things that they do and things that we would like to accomplish. So I appreciate your time. This person I was asked, I wanted her to lead because she's been on the front lines for much longer than I have. And so she is very knowledgeable about the history. We're maintaining that history as best we can. That goes back more than 100 years.
If you have questions, I would be happy to try it. Do you have questions? Yes, they do. Okay. Yes, they do. When it does, I will call you.
You would know more than I would. If anybody else?
Any other questions, comments? Good to see everybody here. You have a great crew.
Thank you.
Thank
Anybody
you.
else coming up?
Hello, my name is Richard Carroll, 98 Limestone Boulevard, Chiillicothe, Ohio. Thank you for your time. I'll make it short, but I made copies of this so that I could hand it out so you guys could read. I was in contract with a solar company, and we had the inspector, which is the Ross County, because Chiillicothe doesn't have an inspector at this time. And he came out and inspected my house. It failed inspection. He gave 3 business days for him to straighten it out. Then the hurricane came through. It created havoc. I called him. He was okay with allowing the extra time. So the following week, he called AEP, and then he called me and said the first available was October 10th. He asked me if that would work for me. Absolutely. So then he called the solar company and set up the appointment for them to arrive at my house, had AEP there, myself, the solar company to do the work. We go, the solar company, power company, called in an appointment on the 9th. On the 9th for the 11th to have the solar inspected, not the electrical. What failed was the electrical. The meter coming out of the top, I went from 100 amp service to a 200 amp service, and it needed raised up to 10 feet. It was only about 8 feet, and there was an AC unit in front of that he wanted moved. So we got all the work done. They came on the 10th. AEP disconnected. They completed the work. They tried to call the inspector. About 3 hours. No. So I finally called the Ross County inspector. We got him. They said they wasn't on the schedule until Friday. I said, no, that can't be possible. Mr. Bittler called myself and everyone and set the appointment up. He needs to be there. So long story short, I went down there. I spoke with him. He showed up at my house, stated that the solar company changed the appointment, which they didn't. They just scheduled one for the solar inspection, not the electrical inspection. So I'm there. He approved it, called the lady in the office. She said she was calling AEP as I left. So I leave. 2 hours later, the solar power people said, we have to leave. So they left. 6 o'clock, I called AEP. They never got a phone call. So I went all night without electricity. The next morning, I go down, and Mr. Bittler had said that they had changed, the solar company had changed the appointment. So I went and checked with Chester, I believe was her name, in the Ross County building office. The only thing she had on the docket was the appointment for Friday. She never had anything scheduled for Thursday at any time. So Mr. Bittler scheduled everybody but himself to be there. So I get all that, and this took a day or two to work everything out. I go back over to the other office. The lady in the office calls AEP, gets an answering machine. I politely say, I'm sorry, I'm not leaving until we actually talk to somebody. And then she's calling like 3 different numbers for close to an hour. She finally gets somebody. The lady said, we apologize. She didn't apologize. She said, I left early. I never got it till this morning. So they got there, and they got the power turned back on. So at the end here, the last 3 things, the communication between the Ross County and your Chiillicothe, it's lacking, because the number that the solar panel company was called, which was for Chiillicothe, they either never responded to it or it never got over to the Ross County for the 3 hours until I called. That would have helped. I then had the honor of talking to Mr. Henninger, which is Mr. Bittler's boss. And I asked him, I said, is it normal for you guys to set up the appointment? And he said, no. I said, there is where the problem lies. If the solar panel company had set up all the appointments, none of this would have got messed up. I truly believe that it was an honest mistake, but it was a mistake that if it was done through the right steps, I don't believe it would have happened. So my question to you guys is, I asked Mr. Henninger, is there a way that I can make a formal complaint against a city/county employee? And he said, not that he knows. I called the HR department of the Chiillicothe. I asked the same thing. They sent me upstairs to Kathy. Same thing. There's no way to make a formal complaint. And then, so either someone's not informed or they're trying to protect. So then, of course, telling my story over the weekend and things, I find out that Mr. Bittler has had difficulties with other people. I don't know the exact details. I'll leave it there. I would like to know, can we get a way to make a formal complaint like this to an HR department or something so that it can be in their file so that if it happens 5, 6, 7 times, something can be done about it. That's all I have. Thank you. Are there any questions?
I had Mr. Bittler at my house twice. He was. I had no problems with him. But again, you had a different situation. I understand.
No, let me rephrase. I'm sorry. Personally, it was absolutely. He was very polite, very nice. I have no issue with the man. I just believe that he overstepped his authority by setting up the appointment.
Okay.
And that messed everything up.
And I think we have an issue, and kind of for everybody. If you're having building inspections done in the city, you call and leave a message on the city's phone, and then they relay that message to the county because they're doing all of our inspections, and they've done that for a year now, over a year. Well, they've done all our commercial for about 7 or 8 years, and done our residential off and on for that time period as well. So there's an extra step in there that makes it somewhat confusing. Along this same line, as far as a complaint, the building department falls under the safety service director. So I would start with there. That's Jeff Carbon, safety service director. And again, even though we're contracting the county to do it, that should be a conversation between his office and that office as well. Last year, our total building inspection costs that the city charges for plans, complaints, and all the inspections they did was $42,000. And I think we're at an appropriate time where maybe we have a discussion is, do we need our own building department or do we need to look at other options as well? And in doing so, that would streamline that process and take possibly that issue out that you had, the communication issue, because you're going from the solar to the city to the county to where it's confusing for people. And I don't think it's anybody's fault probably, but it's, that's all right.
I believe it was a very honest mistake, and it was just a coincidence of a series of things. Just like the lady in the office. She made one phone call that someone that AEP had been contacting her several times that day. Are we ready to go back there? You know, and she was waiting to get that. She called one person. You know, very well, the next morning she's calling 3 people. You know, it's just that lady happened to leave early. So I do honestly believe that it was just it
fell through the cracks, unfortunately.
Right. And on the grand scheme of things, with everything that was going on, North Carolina, Florida, the weather was just about perfect. It was an inconvenience for me.
Right.
But like I said, I do believe that it was an overreach of his authority only on setting the appointment up. I believe the proper channel should have been for him to call the solar panel people and say, I know AEP is now scheduling this. You need to get on it.
Okay. I think long term we should look at options for how we do our building inspection program, how it works, what is the right way to do it. And I mean, I'm not saying we don't need our own building department, but I think we should look at those options as city council to determine is it appropriate. You know, for 7 to 8 years, county has done all of our commercial and has done the majority of our residential. And with the cost of it, do we really need to have our own, or would we be better served combining resources and working with the county on this versus having our own? And I'm not saying we have to go one way or the other because I don't have the whole picture, but I think Steve being the chair for that would be a good thing to kind of look into and look at options for us.
I do know the commissioners had a interesting meeting today, so that
Tomorrow.
Is it
Tomorrow.
It's
Yes.
going to be an interesting. So
Yeah, they were closed today.
Yeah, that might have something to affect this also. So
Yes. All right. Thank you for your time.
thank you.
Well, I assure you, we'll get this information over there, but if you want to send something over, as Councilman Creed has suggested, that's probably not a bad idea to make sure it starts the ball rolling, but I'll make sure that I go ahead and relay this information.
Hello, my name's Jason Sally. I live at 194 Marvin Drive, Chiillicothe. I'll try to be brief. I'm not an elegant speaker, so forgive me if I glance down at my notes. But back in January, I came before this council pleading for this local body to address the gun violence in Chiillicothe. I was hoping by now our Safety Services Committee would have created a concrete plan to address this issue. I was hoping by now our mayor would have came out publicly condemning the gun violence and making a commitment to deal with it and address it head on. But sadly, to my knowledge, that hasn't happened yet. In January, I also came here and shared the story of my niece, who was shot in a triple shooting last December over here on East Water Street. Today, I'm not here to revisit that tragedy, but to talk about another shooting that just happened 2 weeks ago. On Saturday, October 5th, gunfire once again broke the peace of our city streets. Ironically, my niece, who survived that deadly shooting on East Water Street, found herself again running from gunfire. Over the last several months, it's been a slow process for her recovery and being able to get out in public again and feel safe and confident to do so. So that Saturday, she and her friend was walking the floodwall, one of the beautiful amenities we have here in Chiillicothe. And she got tired and wanted to go visit her aunt that lived over on Mulberry Street. When they turned onto Mulberry Street, they happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time when two gunmen opened fire at a house. For a second time in my niece's life, she had to run from gunfire in our city. She ran down to the city park, hid behind some trees, called my wife, let her know where she was at, called the police, let them know what had just happened. But she wasn't the only one that was traumatized by this event, this most recent shooting. My nephew lived next door to the home that got hit by the gunfire. He can tell you today the image that he saw looking out his bedroom window. He made eye contact with one of the gunmen as bullets was being volleyed into his neighbor's home. It's trauma like this that keeps coming up over and over and over again in our community. And nothing's changing. So I ask all of you, how much more? How many more people? How many more families have to be scarred and traumatized by senseless violence in our community? Those of you who've lived here most of your life, you remember where we used to be able to walk down the street, leave our doors open at nighttime, not worried that somebody was going to drive down the street, roll down the window, and open fire. It didn't used to be like this. So I'm asking all of you once again, the same as I did in January, will you commit to addressing this crisis in our town? And I call it a crisis because it's not getting better. It's not getting better. We're still having shooting after shooting. That's why this time I'm not standing here as an angry parent who witnessed firsthand the effects of gun violence. I've went and partnered with Brady, a National Gun Violence Prevention Organization, and brought a chapter here at Chiillicothe to help work with each one of you in any organization that wants to tackle this crisis. I'm hoping that this time around, folks will stand up and say, I want our streets to be safe again. And this is not a political issue. I know we're in the part of election season. This is not a political issue. This is a health and safety issue in our community. Gun violence is robbing our children, our communities of their peace, their innocence, and in some cases, their future. And it's time for this body to act. Not with empty words, not with thoughts and prayers, not with empty promises, but decisive, meaningful action. I'm glad I came in hearing a little bit about the budget and stuff. We need more police officers on our streets. We need to give them all the resources necessary to combat the flow of illegal guns. The people that did the shooting, the suspects, was a 20-year-old and a 15-year-old. Why should a 15-year-old have a gun on him and walk in the streets of Chiillicothe and then open fire? We have a problem here, and so often we sweep it under the rug until it becomes too big. Have we all forgot that not long ago we had a gunman go to the back door of our police department and open fire on one of our local heroes? How many more kids? How many more people before this body stands up? There's things we can do. We can increase mental health services for our youth, implement programs across the board, de-escalation, crisis management in our school. There's grant funding for gun lockboxes that we can pass out and distribute to those who need those. So somebody don't break in and steal a gun out of a car. I read that police report just last week. It makes me wonder, will that gun be used in another shooting in the near future? Columbus passes out lockboxes free, those who want them. Just a little piece of the puzzle to help address this issue. So I'm asking all of you once again, what will it take? Will it take more violence? Will it take more trauma? Only you in this honorable body can answer that question. Thank you.
Thank you. Safety Service Chair, like you said earlier, we talked about adding more personnel to the fire department. We also talked, because we haven't had the police chief here yet, but we also want to add more to the police department. And I myself will be pushing for that. And I know we have retired police officer, retired state patrol, and I know that they know the importance of that as well. To not only, right now they're just going from call to call a lot of the time. They don't have the time to be proactive. We need police on the street. You brought up some other good ideas too that we can talk about as well, with the gun lock boxes, things like that. So maybe, hopefully those things will help us. I think the big thing that we can do right now is make sure that we're better staffed than what we are and keep moving to make us a more safer community over the years. So I appreciate what you're saying. I think we're going to start moving in the right direction. Hopefully we'll see the results of that in the coming time. I mean, it will take time for that to happen though.
I can also speak on behalf of the school and Mrs. Payne as well, that we have increased our mental health services in the school. We have lots of social workers and mental health professionals that are working with our students now. So. Right. And we do that quite often. So just so you rest assured about that. Okay.
Any other comments? I would invite you on some of those ideas that you have to go ahead and forward them either to me or to Mr. Creed or anybody else on council, so that there are some concrete ideas that can be addressed and taken a look at. So we appreciate your time. Thank you. Next, we move to old business. Is there any old business to come before council? Hearing none, we'll move now to petitions and correspondence.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. I have not received anything.
Is there any new business to come before council? Hearing none, we'll move to the reading of ordinances and resolutions.
Thank you, President Shoemaker. We have 15 items on the agenda this evening. Item number 1 is the third reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating funds from the David Mead Massey Trust for police evidence testing.
Clerk will call the roll.
Bennett,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Barnes,
Yes.
McKeever,
Yes.
Dement,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Prohl,
Yes.
Creed.
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted. Next ordinance.
Item number 2 is the second reading of an ordinance repealing and replacing Section 1311.02, Schedule of Fees of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Chiillicothe.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 3 is the second reading of an ordinance establishing and updating the Chiillicothe Building Department residential fee schedule and non-residential schedule.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 4 is the second reading of an ordinance establishing a zoning department fee schedule for the City of Chiillicothe.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 5 is the second reading of an ordinance repealing and replacing Chapter 901, Street Openings of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Chiillicothe.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 6 is the second reading of an ordinance amending Chapter 905.01, Application for Curb Cut Permits of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Chiillicothe.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 7 is the second reading of an ordinance updating the water management and sediment control regulations of the City of Chiillicothe.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 8 is the first reading of an ordinance amending Section 151.02 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Chiillicothe, Ohio, titled Court Personnel, and appropriating funds for the remainder of 2024.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 9 is the first reading of an ordinance reallocating funds in the amount of $18,000 to pay for fire department opticom equipment and declaring an emergency.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 10 is the first reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating funds in the amount of $1,000 for the fire department's senior home inspection program.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 11 is the first reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating additional funds for the PY23 CDBG grant and declaring an emergency.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 12 is the first reading of an ordinance providing for an agreement between the City of Chiillicothe, Ohio, and the Ross County Commissioners, whereby the City of Chiillicothe, Ohio will continue to be eligible through 2025 for state reimbursement of costs incurred in appointing counsel for indigent criminal defense.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 13 is the first reading of an ordinance appropriating $35,000 for repairs to the Mechanic Street retaining wall and declaring an emergency.
President Shoemaker,
Councilman Barnes.
I would like to make a motion to waive the 3-read rule on this item.
Second by Mr. Prohl. The clerk will call the roll on the waiver of the 3-read rule.
Bennett,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Barnes,
Yes.
McKeever,
Yes.
Dement,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Prohl,
Yes.
Creed.
Yes.
The 3-read rule is waived. The clerk will now call the roll relative to the ordinance.
Bennett,
Yes.
Payne, Barnes,
Yes.
McKeever,
Yes.
Dement,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Prohl,
Yes.
Creed.
Yes.
Ordinance is adopted. The next ordinance.
Item number 14 is the first reading of an ordinance appropriating $17,723.69 for payment of an outstanding ODOT invoice and declaring an emergency.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda. Next ordinance.
Item number 15 is the first reading of an ordinance to approve current replacement pages to the Chiillicothe codified ordinances and declaring an emergency.
Ordinance will move to the next agenda, and I would now accept a motion to adjourn. Motion by Ms. Bennett, second by Mr. Dement, and the clerk will call the roll.
Bennett,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Barnes,
Yes.
McKeever,
Yes.
Dement,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Prohl,
Yes.
Creed.
Yes.
We are adjourned.